you're like me, you've heard at least a dozen stories of people who've gotten rich building and owning self-storage facilities. I've often wondered whether self-storage is a dying industry or whether there's actually a future to it at all. I sit down today with Ken Nitzberg, who's been in the industry for over 30 years and is one of the most prominent figures in the industry to this day. And Ken explains the industry. We talk about the business model, and he's got some really interesting things to say about the future of the self-storage industry. I think you're going to want to stick around for this one. Boundary Breakers is brought to you by Carter & Clark. Could you just help us out a little bit and tell us a little bit about your background? Where were you born? A little bit about early age, Ken.
A long time ago. I was born in San Francisco, 9 months after my dad got back from World War II, and then moved north at age 2 days to Petaluma, California, where I grew up. My dad had a chicken ranch, like a lot of people in those days. So I grew up on a chicken ranch. Graduated from Petaluma High School, went to UC Davis, wanted to be a veterinarian until I met organic chemistry. And that took care of that real quick. As a good friend of mine, Matt, who's a physician, always tells me, either you get organic chemistry or you don't. You can't study it. Either your mind works that way or it doesn't. And I didn't even come close. So I went into ag business because in College of Agriculture, because A, I grew up in a ranch, and B, in the College of Agriculture, there wasn't a foreign language requirement, which would have killed me. I have a kid here. I cannot speak any. I have enough trouble. English is my second language sometimes.
I love it.
Graduated, went to work for a little insurance company selling insurance. It eventually morphed into financial planning, and then we had a little office in Berkeley, and there was a friend who had an office in San Francisco, and we merged the two together and formed a company called Equitech Financial Group, which was early on in the financial planning world. And we grew that thing to $4 billion under assets under management, listed on the New York Stock Exchange, took it public, obviously. I rang the bell one morning in New York, and we ran that for 4 or 5 years. And then we sold it, and I retired. And after 3 months, my wife said, "You're out of here." So with one of my old employees of my old firm, we started Devon, and we were going to do the same thing we'd done before, which was real estate primarily. And we did a couple of deals. And then in 1993, we bought a vacant strip center in Houston from what was then the RTC, if anybody remembers that, the Resolution Trust Corporation, which was the government, quasi-government entity formed to bail out all the upside down savings and loans. And we bought this little strip center that had been through the RTC twice, through 2 different S&Ls.
Wow.
It was 50,000 square feet for $600,000, which, you couldn't not buy it. And then we said, now what are we going to do with it? Because the last thing was in Houston. The last thing Houston needed in 1993 was another vacant strip center. So one of our guys who was living there and had just going through divorce said, let's convert it to storage, because he needed a place to put his couple of belongings, having been tossed out of the house. And we said, no. Real estate guys don't do self-storage. They do office buildings and shopping centers and apartment houses, which we had done for 20 plus years. But we said, this isn't brain surgery, so why not? So we bought it for $600,000, put $1 million in it, and 40 months later sold it for $4 million. And just pretty good business. So we stopped everything else we were doing and we concentrated just on self-storage, primarily doing what's called conversions. In other words, buying assets that had failed in their previous use. Primarily big box retail was our perfect model, but we have done car dealerships. We just opened a hospital we converted. We have done manufacturing facilities, office buildings, you name it, as long as it has the right traffic counts and demographics and competition levels. And since 1993, we've done about 400 of them in 37, 38 states. We had stores in 3 European countries. I was commuting to our office in Amsterdam once a month for 4 years. It's 11 hours going and 12 coming home, and there's not enough alcohol or drugs to make that flight fun. It doesn't matter what class of seat you're sitting in. We finally sold those in 2022. And about a year ago now, we sold an 80% interest in the company to a much, much larger real estate firm in Chicago called Inland Private Capital, a 55-year-old, $17 billion real estate firm. Since we were managing a lot of self-storage assets for them, and we finally decided we should quit dating and get married. So we bought 80%, I kept 20. And when we did that deal in January of 24, we had 93 stores across America, about 220 employees. As we sit here today, we have 192 stores and 440 employees, on our way to 400 to 500 stores in the next 2 to 3 years. Portfolio today is worth about $2 billion. On a personal level, I'm a past chair of the Self Storage Association, which is the national not-for-profit trade group. And I was on the board there for a long time. Then I finally got off. And then last year they called me and said, would you come back on as our alumni director for the year? So I'm back on the national board. I'm also one of only 47 people in history of the industry who ever been inducted into Self Storage Hall of Fame, which means I have a little trophy, and that plus $5 to get me a cup of coffee at Starbucks. So I've been very involved in the industry for many, many years. And in the process, we've also started a reinsurance company in the Cayman Islands and an insurance agency in the U.S., which did $130 million of premium last year, which made us the largest in the industry.
Wow.
And in my spare time, I like to hunt and fish. Other than that, pretty dull.
Yeah, sounds like it. No, that was great. That was a fantastic recap. I appreciate it. I mean, as one of only 47 members in the sort of industry Hall of Fame, I mean, you're obviously sort of one of the architects or one of the titans of the self-storage industry. Tell us a little bit about the self-storage industry. I mean, it sounds like, at least the way you tell it, I don't know if there's some humility mixed in. It sounds like you sort of accidentally fell into it out of a suggestion. But tell us a little bit about the industry today,
Sure.
and how it works.
Well, the industry actually started in the early 60s. And what it was a land banking idea. You were a developer in XYZ city. You thought the path to progress was heading west. So you'd run out a couple miles and either buy or option some land. And when the path of progress caught up with you, you'd build, an apartment house, a strip center, an office building, whatever it was. Okay. And in the interim, to cover the cost of the debt service on that land, you'd put up these little metal storage buildings. Well, it turned out that the return on equity of those little storage buildings was greater than any other asset category in the real estate sector. So very few have ever been torn down for some so-called higher and better use. That's how we bought that little strip center in Houston in 1993. It was the highest and best use. So when we did that in 93, there were probably 20,000 facilities in America, and probably 2% of the population was actually using a self-storage facility. When I was the chair in 2005 and 6, we did the first ever, what we call a census of the industry. We hired an outside consulting firm that, Procter & Gamble hires when they come out with a new toothpaste, see if anybody's going to actually buy it and use it. So who buys our product? Who uses it? What are they willing to pay for? What don't they like? Big 300-page study cost us $300,000, which in our industry was, twice all the money in the world in those days. We since updated every 2 years. And today we're at about a 10.5% penetration of the population who actively today uses a storage facility. Another 15% or so has used one in the last 5 years, but not today. Another 25% has used one more than 5 years ago. And the other half roughly know what it is. They just haven't used it yet. When we opened our first store in Holland, it was in Amsterdam, we were the first one in the country. Wow. So the question wasn't to compete with competitors, but to tell the public, what are we? How do you use us? It was a whole different marketing model. Today, there's probably 55 to 60,000 stores in America. There's about 7 to 8 square feet of self-storage space for every man, woman, child in the country today. Wow. And our penetration, like I said, is about 10.5%. So if our population, if you assume it's 330 million, if we go up 1%, 3 million, and we want to keep that same 10% roughly penetration, we'd have to build 300,000 more units. Again, but it's a very, very local product. People will drive about 15 minutes or about 3 miles to go to one, because in most markets, you'll pass a half a dozen. And we don't really have a name brand. We don't have a Mercedes or a Coca-Cola or a, Rolex. In fact, our signs say self-storage in big letters and Devon, our company, in smaller letters. So it's an industry that's growing very rapidly. And if you look at the NAREIT index, which is for all the different publicly traded REITs of different categories, and there's like 30 to 40 different ones, for shopping centers of different sizes, apartment houses, industrial buildings, all kinds of different sizes. So you look at any 5, 10, or 15 or 20-year period, self-storage is always the number 1 or 2 performer, because we're kind of like the tortoise in the hare and tortoise race. Never win, but we always finish.
Gotcha.
So in really great years, hotel occupancies go up 50%. And in bad years, they go down 90%. If you buy something for $1 and it loses 50%, your stock goes down, God forbid, right? It takes 100% gain to get back to even, not a 50% gain. Just math.
Right.
So the way we make money in the storage industry in market cycles is, in bad markets, we might go down a little bit, but not much, because that's when people tend to downsize and want to keep their stuff. We're a nation of hoarders. I love it. And in good markets, they're buying stuff. They need a place to put it. Yeah. And houses are getting smaller and apartments are getting smaller because of the cost of construction and the cost of the land and the permitting and the building time. So I think our industry still has a great future ahead of it. And the fact that half the population is either currently or have used it, and the other half all know what it is, pretty good precursor.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's interesting. I've got a good friend that he is currently building his 7th facility.
Oh, great.
In the North Atlanta suburbs. And he has been a big believer for 20 plus years, and bought his first one from his uncle and ended up doing very well, and was able to leverage that one to get onto his next one, and so on. And so I know enough to be dangerous. I know enough about the industry to be dangerous, but not nearly enough to be thoughtful. You mentioned that your first investment was a repurpose, right? You bought a shopping center or a strip center and turned it into storage. What percentage of the new product that's going out there is conversion today versus a new building?
It's still probably 75% new ground up and 25% conversion for new projects. We like the conversions, obviously. We've done a couple hundred of them all over the country and in Europe. We like them for a couple of reasons. They're usually infill locations. And it's very difficult to buy dirt in those locations for self-storage because the city doesn't want to zone it. Cities live off sales tax, whereas states typically live off income tax or property tax. So we don't pay any sales tax. That's why every 4-way intersection in America, if it has any respectability, has some kind of retail in every corner, usually a drugstore or McDonald's, because it creates A, jobs, and B, sales tax. We don't do either once it's built. So what our perfect product is that dead Kmart. It's my favorite company in the whole world. We've converted a bunch of Kmarts. They're like cockroaches. They never go away. In fact, when you think around the last dead Kmart, you find 5 more. They're everywhere. So if it's been vacant long enough, and it's enough problem for the police with, raves and drug meth labs and homeless encampments, and the city's getting tired of it and it's ugly, and we go in with our architectural renderings, they are a lot more understanding about giving us zoning for storage than they would have been if it was just a piece of raw dirt on a prime corner in that city. So the development time, if you're going to do a ground up, could be anywhere from 3 to 5 years, because it will take you that 3 years to get the zoning and the permitting and the drawings and the building done. Well, if we're going in and the Kmart's already sitting there, we can save the walls. We can usually save the roof. We can save the floor. the parking lot. So we can get it all built in 12 to 18 months instead of 2 to 3 years. That's a big advantage. And we can do it a lot less expensively because we can use most of the guts, if you would, of the building.
Right.
So
Gotcha.
we've done all kinds. We have just opened in Southfield, Michigan, an office building, 5-story, gorgeous office building. 8 years old, built on purpose for a big accounting firm that outgrew it and moved out. Sat vacant for 3 years till the bank took it back. So we like conversions. We don't like ground up. It's like beating your head against a concrete abutment on the freeway. It just takes forever. And I don't have that kind of patience. You can't see it in this broadcast, but on the wall to my left is a poster a buddy of mine gave to me. And it shows 2 buzzards sitting on a dead tree branch looking down on the ground. And one says to the other, "Patience, my butt. Let's go kill something."
I love it. I love it. I love it. Well, it's interesting. I mean, I'm trying to imagine what sounds like a Class A office building being converted into self-storage. I believe that there are several different types, right? You have indoor, outdoor, climate controlled, et cetera. How has the actual product itself changed since you got into the business?
Dramatically. Back when we did our first one in 93, it's what I would refer to as first generation. Bunch of long, narrow metal buildings with metal roll-up doors. Everybody knows what that is. When you see it, you don't need to sign. To get a permit to build one of those in any kind of major or secondary major city, a suburb of a major city, tantamount to impossible today. City would never give you a permit. We just think they're too ugly. What we build today looks like a new shopping center or an office building. They're gorgeous. We spend more on architecture now than we used to spend on the whole building 25 years ago. Many of the things we do today are multi-story because the cost of the land makes you go up. Secondly, at least for us, our signature in the industry, and some other people are doing it, but we did it pretty much first and do it all the time if we can. It's what's called a drive-through. So I don't know if you've ever rented a storage unit personally, but if it's a long metal building, you pull up, you unlock your door, you roll it up, and you're sitting out there in the rain, the cold, the heat, the humidity, whatever it is. Ours, if they're climate controlled, are inside a building. They're not outside with drive up. You can't drive up to the door. But we have drive lanes. You can drive right into the building. So you're out of the 20 degree below zero chill factor in Minnesota in the winter, or the 99% humidity and 99% temperature in Houston in the summer. You're inside. And it does kind of play head games with some of our competitors, because once the person who's renting the space sees that, and we know that about 70% of our units are rented by women. And we haven't done them in a long time, but we used to do focus groups. And when you ask them what's important, where price comes in out of the top 10 reasons typically?
Last, I don't know.
Number 7 or 8 usually.
7 or 8.
What's 1 and 2 almost every time? Remember, if 7% of the units are rented by women, because they come in on Monday morning.
Safety?
To get all the husband's junk out of the garage so they can park the car.
Yeah.
Right? So it's clean restrooms. It's like, have you ever been on a road trip with your wife or your girlfriend and she says, "Dear, we need to stop at a restroom," and you stop at the gas station and she goes in, does 180, walks back out, says it's dirty? Or as my wife says, the whole world's a man's journal, not so much for the ladies.
Yeah.
So clean restrooms is number 1. Number 2 is safety, or the appearance of it. They're not out in the back 40 in the dark.
Yeah.
They're inside. The building's well lit, secured. It changes the whole emotional and dynamic.
Yeah. Interesting. Very interesting. So I'm sure that you guys have, a sophisticated sort of algorithm that you use, or at least a study with regard to what makes a great, this would be a great location, or this wouldn't be a great location. Is that I'm curious, how complicated of a process is that? Is it all about, you mentioned traffic count earlier. Is it all about just how many people drive by, or is it the number of single family structures within a certain number of miles? I mean, what is the
all the above? We have what we call our acquisition scorecard. So when we have a site presented to us, whether it's from a broker, from a principal, from a lender that's foreclosed, or if one of our guys was just driving by and saw a weathered sign on the site, call this number, we put it through this analysis, and there's 7 key points, and I'll forget a couple of them here, of course. Number 1 is traffic counts. 30 years ago, the main driver was the cheapest price of land you could find. So you bought the land, behind the sewage treatment plant, under the freeway by the railroad tracks where the hobo camp was. Now it's called an unhoused camp, to be politically correct.
Yeah.
And if you built one there today, A, you'd never rent a unit. B, you'd probably never get a permit in the city anyway. So we like to be on major retail thoroughfares where there's lots of traffic that see us. Because about 70% of our tenants today come to us off the internet. But even there, they drive by it every day going to work or school or grandma's house for the movies or dinner or whatever. And the day comes, they said, oh, we need one of these. They'll go online and they'll see, oh, I know that one. I go buy it every day. And they'll come in and rent the unit, or they'll rent it online. So traffic counts are hugely important. Secondly is the amount of competition in the immediate, typically 3-mile market. How many other self-storage units are there? And what's the population? And then we get what's called a units per capita. So if there's 100,000 people and there's 100,000 units in that 3-mile market, it's 1 to 1. If the numbers are, we like those numbers down below about 6 if we can, because the national average is about 8. But then we also look at the quality, because if there are 4 competitors and 5 or 4 of them or 3 of them are these old first generation pieces of garbage with no security, no fencing, no manager, and a Rottweiler running around at night they call security, that's not going to turn on the customer that we want. So we look at the competition, we look at the population, head count. We look at job growth. Is it up or down? People are moving in or moving out? Is the job market stabilized? We look at the average rents, because we know that if what we have to pay for the vacant building, what we have to pay to convert it, what we have to pay in the way of carry costs till we get cash flow break even, that's some number. And that's got to translate back to some rent number. So if we're all in for $100 a foot, we probably need rents of about $1.40 to $1.50 a month. In other words, a 10 by 10, which is kind of the industry bogey, would be $140 to $150 a month. Well, if all the rents in that market are $60, as the saying goes, that dog don't hunt. Well, there's a mix of them. We give each one of them a score, 1 to 10, just like you were taking a test. And if it scores 50 or less, we throw it out. And we know that we probably thrown a couple of babies out with the bathwater because there was some unusual circumstance. If it's 50 to 60, we rerun it and take a look at what do we miss. If it's above 60, we then go put boots on the ground, because up to that point, no one's actually physically seen it. It's all off information from the broker, the seller, the internet, what have you. And then we go talk to the city and say, you guys going to kill us, or are we going to get a zoning change and a building permit? And if all those things happen, then we buy it and we go to work.
Gotcha. It's interesting. You seem very, very bullish on the future of the industry, which makes perfect sense given the population growth and some of the population migration. I mean, I guess if you really sit and think about it, it makes perfect sense. What are your genuine thoughts about what this industry will look like in 10, 20 years? Is it, in other words, where is it sort of on the spectrum of maturity or opportunity, if you will?
Well, there's still a lot of opportunity, but you got to be very careful, because again, we're very, very market specific. We're talking about a 3-mile market. For example, I don't know where you're sitting or if you're familiar with Houston, but there's a freeway that goes around Houston called the 610. If you got on at 8 o'clock in the morning and there were no cars, which will never, ever happen in Houston, it'll still take you all day to drive around Houston. It's the second biggest landmass city in the U.S. The only one bigger, believe it or not, is Anchorage, because it's damn near the whole state of Alaska, okay? Well, if you took everything inside that 610 freeway, that circle, and blew it up to a wall-sized map and put it in your office, and drew little 3-mile circles all over it, which are the market indices, I guarantee you, you're going to have 40 or 50 of them where the market is overbuilt, oversaturated. There's too much product because it was easy to build there or look good or whatever. And there's probably 200 or 300 that are underserved in terms of competitive levels. And there's probably 500 without a single asset at all. So you can say that, Houston's overbuilt or Atlanta's overbuilt or Dallas is overbuilt. That doesn't work. You've got to be a whole lot more specific.
Gotcha.
So there's still plenty of opportunity. And of this, call it 60,000 stores today, probably 40,000 or more are what we would call first generation. The long rectangular metal buildings with metal roll-up doors sitting out in the sun. If you're in Houston in the summertime, it gets up to 140 in those units. Yeah. And in the wintertime in Minneapolis, it gets to minus 30. Doesn't do whatever you're storing better be weatherproof.
Yeah, for sure. Sure.
There are still plenty of opportunities. As long as the population keeps growing. I mean, think of another product that is as well known in the general population and has only a 10.5% current usage. Yeah. If we just went from 10.5 to 11.5, that's 3 million more tenants today. If there's no population growth at all.
Yep. That's interesting.
So I think there's a lot of headroom left. But the industry is changing. We used to have 5 public REITs. Now we have 4. One ate the other one. But those of the 60,000 stores, those 4 REITs, which are the big guys, probably have under 10,000 stores between them. So the preponderance, 75%, give or take, of the industry are still with what I call mom and pops. They have 1 or 2 or 3. They're not very sophisticated. They're good people. They make great livings, but their use of technology is almost non-existent. And they're typically in the far out secondary, tertiary, and retail markets. You're not going to find a mom and pop in downtown Chicago where we have a store, for example. They don't have the money. They can't compete with the legal requirements or the building codes or what do we call it? Cook County, you get to buy your property back every 12 years with property taxes. So it's I think the business has a lot of upside. But again, you just got to be smart about it, which just doesn't make us unique in any sense of the word.
Right. I love it. Fascinating stuff. So you mentioned that you guys started a reinsurance or insurance company or captive in the Caymans. I made the assumption that insurance product has to do with the contents of the units themselves. I could be totally wrong. Tell us about that and how that came about.
Well, first of all, let me explain one thing, because when you say Cayman Islands, everybody thinks you're the mafia and you're hiding money. That is impossible. The Cayman Islands have a treaty. They have an entity there called CEMA, the Cayman Island Monetary Authority, which is kind of a combination: Department of Justice, Internal Revenue Service, SEC, Department of Insurance. It's the whole ball game. They regulate everything. They have a treaty with the IRS, so I can hide money all day long from my wife. I can't hide it from the IRS. We hired Aon, which is one of the world's largest insurance brokers, to manage this company for us. And it's, as you said, it's for tenant insurance, not the physical buildings. That's a whole different product. And we've looked and haven't been able to find a way to make it make sense. But we started with 16 member firms that I put together. We started in 2005, finally got operational in September of 2006. And in 4 months, we did a whopping $600,000 of premium of tenant insurance, so that when you come in and rent, because nobody in those days really wanted to do it, but now everybody does. But you come in and rent, and the attitude is, if it's worth storing, it's worth insuring. And so you can buy up to $5,000, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 covered. $5,000 is $16 a month. And it covers most perils, theft, fire, flood, what have you. And in 2024, I don't have the final numbers in, but we now are up to 26 members. We've very carefully and slowly added. We have about 1,600 stores in that group, and we did about $75 million of premium and turned a profit of about almost $40 million. Wow. And then in 2016, we started an insurance agency, because to sell insurance in the U.S., you have to be licensed as an agency, first of all, then a licensed insurance agent. So we started our own agency. It's based in Indianapolis. And last year it did about $135 million, because we have other firms besides just our 26 members selling through it. And then 3 years ago, we started a catastrophic reinsurance company and came in to spread some of the risk around. So it's been pretty active. And then 2 years ago, we started our own property management software system. Instead of using a third party, we have our own. And what we've tried to do is get as many of the vendor-related products that we use every day, that we own and control for two reasons. One is obviously profitability. The second one is control.
Yeah.
Because our old property management software company, and it's a fine company, but they had all the information about all 100,000 of our tenants.
Yeah.
And the only question is not if, but what day will they be owned by Google or Amazon or whomever who want that information.
Right.
So, I mean, the only asset we have is not our 192 stores today. It's the tenants in them. Without the tenants, the buildings are firewood. So anything that gets between me and our tenant, I don't like. I want to be there. So I can control the flow of information, the fee structure, the profitability, the margins, what have you, rather than depending on somebody else who, I mean, a company we used to use, fine company, we used them for 20 years, and then they got sold to one venture capital firm and then a second one. They aren't philanthropic entities.
Right.
And so the whole model has changed. So we did our own.
Gotcha. That sounds very smart. What's I'm going way in the weeds here, but I'm just curious, but okay. What's the key? There's obviously the analysis and the calculation in terms of building the structure. Does it make sense? Where do you have to be? Break even? What about the actual management itself?
Sure.
Post-construction, what's sort of the key to optimizing the management of a self-storage facility?
Well, it comes down to that old real estate adage of location, in my opinion. We are a retail business disguised as self-storage. If you aren't on a major retail arterial today, where there's lots of traffic and people can see you, you still may be successful, but it's going to be a big rock up a steep hill. You got to be on a major retail arterial. Just think about yourself driving around. I don't know what community you live in, but you'll see all the newer self-storage facilities on the major thoroughfares because they need the traffic visibility. Secondly, we need a good manager. I mean, there's a big push in the industry to go without managers, to go everything on a kiosk. I'm not a believer in that. I'm sorry. I mean, if you have a little 20,000 square foot store, sure, because you can't afford a manager. Our average store is about 65 to 70,000 square feet. And it might do, $2 million a year in revenue, and the margins are 40% if it's full. So that store manager, in effect, is the CEO of a little firm that's got a $10 million asset, a $2 million revenue stream, and $1 million of NOI. You don't want to hire the guy at minimum wage, $10 an hour. So we tend to pay our managers a lot more money because they're the tip of the spear. They're the first thing that a potential tenant sees. And then, of course, today it's obligatory. You have to have an interactive website that people can rent on. They can pay their rent on. It's interactive. They can talk to a live person. If you don't have those things, you're kind of like a cat on the freeway. You're roadkill. You just haven't got hit yet. Because the world has gone to that everywhere. I mean, if I get home at night when I'm in town, if there isn't an empty 1 or 2 Amazon boxes in the garage, then it's been a slow day for my wife. So
yeah, amen.
If you're not playing, the Amazon game and the Google game and the SEO game, you're an antique. I mean, you'll probably still do fine, especially if you're in a little tiny rural town and you're the only show in town. But if you're in, one of the top, we like to be in the top 50 MSAs. And if you're in those markets and you're not competitive on the internet, then you're just not a player. You just will not do well, period.
Well, something that jumps out to me in talking to you is that, so many people are resistant to change, whether it's because they're afraid of change or
Sure.
change is uncomfortable. You seem to embrace change as an opportunity. And I can't even begin to imagine how much things have changed since you started in the industry, but
Light years.
First of all, I guess, am I correct? Do you believe that one of the reasons that you have been so successful is because you are open to adjusting with the times and understanding, how to get better, what do you need to do to reach the customer? What's been the secret for your success?
Well, our industry is not known as a bastion of technological advancements. Okay. As an industry, we're probably firmly, when you look at all 60,000 stores, firmly embedded in about 1985. At least half of the stores out there don't even have a computer in the office yet. It's the retired Navy chief. They're good guys. And, mom works the counter and dad, takes care of the facility, and they live in the apartment upstairs. And that is way too common. We don't build apartments in our stores, haven't in years. We don't want somebody whose number one objective is to get a free apartment and number two objective to get a job. So we don't house our managers, which, is kind of the norm in the industry. And I think it's a disaster for me. So yeah, you've got to keep moving ahead with the changes that occur. You got to stick your foot out there, try some new things, or you'll get left behind. When I started that captive insurance company in 2005, what I did is I simply called 15 of my friends in the industry that I knew could make a decision, didn't have to go to mommy and daddy and their uncles and their aunts and their outside shareholders. And we got them all in a room. And I brought a guy in from Aon who was in charge of setting up their captive program throughout the Western Hemisphere, who explained everything. And I said, who's in? And they all raised their hand. And I said, Aon wanted a fee to do a market study, and it was $75,000. And I said, okay, guys, we haven't formed a company. We don't have any checking accounts. I said, if you divide that by 15 guys, I want each of you to send me a check for $5,000 made out to me. You all know me well enough, and that's not enough money for me to take my wife and go way long enough. And we'll hire Aon to do it. And they did, and they came back with a study, and they were blown away on the industry. The guy who did it was based for Aon in New Jersey. And he went to the Department of Insurance in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, New York, and Connecticut, because they're all right there. And if you're an insurance company and you're selling a particular policy, whether it's homeowners, auto, pet, whatever it is, you got to file that with that Department of Insurance in that state every year. You got to file your premiums and your claims and your ratios and everything, which I didn't know. I didn't have a clue. So Michael went to all four of those state departments of insurance. That's public information, and got all that information. Called me back and said, guys, this is a license to steal. In the P&C business, they normally assume that they're going to pay out 90% of the premium and costs and claims the first year. Our claims ratios run about 10%. So it's been extremely profitable. And it's just taken off. But we've kept it a secret. We have conferences all year long, all over the place in the industry. A couple of big ones every year, one in the spring, one in the fall, that the Self Storage Association puts on, which we've cleverly named the spring and fall conferences. We can't get anything biased, okay? And we've never put on a presentation. We've never run an ad in the magazines or never written an article. We just want to fly, a couple feet under the radar, and we're doing just fine. Thank you very much.
No, I love it. And to be fair, you said, we mentioned Cayman Islands. People think about mafia. I had a captive for my prior company for health insurance that we went through the Caymans. It's very common. Just
on the
for the audience to know.
Yeah, the Aon office in Cayman probably has 150 captive accounts, of which we're just one.
Yeah.
And they're great people. We love them. They've been super to us, and they're very smart, and they're very cooperative, and I can't say enough good things about them.
I love it. Well, we just have a couple more minutes, and I've got I've got two final questions. The first is, if an audience member was had their interest piqued, or they're watching this because they are new. If you were speaking to somebody that really was a professional that really wanted to get into this industry, what do you tell them?
Well, there's a couple things. First of all, we manage a lot of assets for others. So this person is listening to this podcast and says, I'd love to get one of those things. I don't know what's up from down from sideways. They can come to us and hire us, and we'll find a location. We'll help them buy it. We'll manage it. We'll operate it. We'll do all the reporting and the accounting and send them reports monthly or quarterly or whatever they want. We have been doing that for 33 years for a lot of big institutions like the pension fund of General Mills, the pension fund for the state of Michigan retirement system. One of our biggest accounts today is the employees retirement system of the state of Texas. And we have lots of, the doctor did one of these and the wife was going to manage it. And after 2 years, she said, I'm out of here. And they called us. So we do a lot of what's called third-party management. And we do everything from soup to nuts, whatever somebody wants. Or if they want to do their own thing, good luck. We can point them in the right direction. But there's lots and lots and lots of moving parts. So if you're not doing it pretty much full-time, you're probably going to get in trouble. But we love that because then we'll go buy it from the bank when they foreclose on you.
Yeah. Is there a lot of consolidation, or are the small mom and pops, first generation, just sort of unattractive assets to the bigger companies?
Well, there's a little of both. I mean, if it's a little mom and pop with a 10,000 square footer in a tertiary market out in the middle of Nebraska somewhere, it's a love-hate thing. They hate the big REITs because they think they're going to move into their town and build a site across the street. Never going to happen. Okay. They love them because they think when they're ready to retire, they're going to call one of the REITs and they're going to overpay for it so they can move to, Key West and retire. Neither is true. The REITs will only go into markets where they can end up with 8 or 10 stores so they can get some management efficiency. You can't have one way out in the middle of nowhere. So there is consolidation, and there's been a lot in the last few years. But I mean, some of it is just the big guys buying the big guys. None of the REITs today, that's wrong. There are 4 REITs left. Public Storage it used to be the biggest. Extra Space is bigger now because they bought Life. So the combination of the two got a little bigger. The Public's a little embarrassed today after being the biggest for 30 years. But Public bills about 20 a year, and they've got 300. Doesn't move the needle very much. Extra Space doesn't build. CubeSmart doesn't build. And National Storage Affiliates doesn't build. They buy and they'll do AVs, but they don't build. Because if you're a REIT, your stock price is very dependent upon your dividend payout. And if you got a lot of stuff you're building that isn't generating current cash flow, sooner or later it's going to impact how much money you can kick out in terms of dividends. So they don't do it. They buy.
Gotcha.
And they're willing to pay full retail because when you look at their models, we do models that are 5, 6, 7 years based on an IRR. To get an IRR, you got to sell. They do models based on cash flow to support their dividend payout. So if they can if their dividend payout's 3% and they're paying a 4 cap for something, which the industry thinks is crazy, it's still accretive.
Yeah.
They're geniuses.
Interesting.
It's a different model. It's a different objective. So there will always continue to be some level of consolidation, but will the 4 or maybe 5 or 6 and someday REITs own 70% of the industry? Never, in my opinion. And this is a conversation that's been going on for the 30 years I've been in the business.
Well, I mean, I guess that's a double-edged sword, but that's a really important, I would imagine that's an important sort of analysis or thought process to sort of engage in for somebody looking to a professional that was really going to dive into the industry, especially earlier in their career, because
when you build it, you need to know what your exit strategy is.
Yeah, exactly.
If you're building a 15,000 square footer in a tertiary market, there's a whole different buying group. You're not going to sell it to one of the REITs. They're not going to buy anything that smaller in that market.
Yeah. So you may have said this already. I apologize. Outside of the REITs, are you guys the largest owner-operator?
No, I think the latest survey that came out from some of the trade magazines had us like 11 or 12. But By the end of the 25, we'll probably be number 8 or 9. I mean, there's 4 REITs, and then there's U-Haul, which is not a REIT. It's a regular public corporation. So they're the 5 biggest.
Okay.
And then there's 5 public companies, that have 200 to 300. We have 192, so we're trailing a little bit, but the average guy out there has 3 or 4 or 2.
Right.
Or you're, and it's got 7, so he's a monster.
Yeah. Gosh, that's fascinating. I mean, what a fascinating
each of our
industry.
regional directors has 15 to 20 they have to manage. So we are, it's a difference. It's a whole different logarithmic formula that when you grow to that size.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Last question. If you got the opportunity to go back and travel back in time to 1993 and talk to your younger self, based on an unbelievable career, a lot of success, but I'm sure you've learned a lot in that time frame. What would you tell your younger self?
Well, we never really owned much of anything. We owned pieces and promoted interests. So I would like to own a lot more of these or a bigger percentage of them. Because if I did, I wouldn't be speaking to you now.
You'd be in Key West, right?
Well, that's Florida, but maybe Hawaii or something.
Yeah.
At my apartment in Paris in the summer. But anyway, we've never been an ownership company, but now that we got purchased by our biggest partner, we effectively own the stores with them. So that's a good thing. And we kept 20% of the company ownership. So as that portfolio grows and hopefully prospers, we will too on the same curve.
Yeah. I love it. Or if somebody wants to learn more about Devon, where can they go? We'll put a link up, but what's the website they can go to learn more?
www.devonselfstorage.com. Not too complicated.
Beautiful.
It's
Devon Self Storage.
You want to know about us, plus a whole bunch you don't. Lists all of our stores, where they are, what cities, and pictures of them, and rental rates, and all of our officers, and how to apply for a job or whatever. Okay.
Yeah.
Or how to rent a unit online and pay the rent, or whatever it may be the case.
Love it. I love it. Well, I know you have to jump, and I want to be respectful of your time. Thank you so much for joining us, Ken. This was a fantastic conversation.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Enjoyed it.
All right.
You too.
Take care.
Thanks.
Don't forget, everybody, you can find Boundary Breakers in a lot of places. You can watch our episodes on the Boundary Breakers YouTube channel, or you can listen to each podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or any of the other major podcasting platforms. Thanks for listening.